MotoDork.
Hi, MotoDork here, and as you can see, I'm not on my motorcycle. And as you can see, the motorcycle is not here in the garage. And that's because a little over a month ago, I sold it. So, 11 years on that motorcycle. Uh, Technically the second owner of the bike. I put I don't know, over 40,000 miles on it in 11 years. I think it had 27,000 miles on it when I bought it, and it had almost 70,000 on it when I sold it. So, yeah, really good times on that bike, but I don't have it anymore. And there's a reason I don't have it anymore. I bought this. That's right. I bought a Jaguar, a 2004 model Vandenpla with had 83,000 miles on it. So the previous owner really only put around 4,000 miles a year on it, a little over 4,000 miles a year, and I'm pretty happy with it. So, why sell the bike and buy a Jaguar? That's a good question. I have wanted one of these cars since I was 18 years old. And it all goes back to a very beautiful girl I knew in high school. You know, I'm a dork, and I've always been a dork, and I was a dork in high school. But I had a few friends, and one of my friends one day asked me to drive her in the homecoming parade because she was a contestant. And her father was a doctor, and they lived in the golf club community here in where I live. And I went to her house that day and found out that I would be driving her in her mother's Jaguar. And I think it was an 85 model or an 86 model. This was in 1989 when I was a senior in high school. And it was an XJ6 and relatively new car. And I've never forgotten what that car felt like to drive. How it drove, how it rode, how it handled, what it smelled like, what it sounded like when I started it up. You know, I've never forgotten that. And ever since then, I've wanted one of these cars. I've wanted an XJ car. And it took me many, many decades, but I finally have one. Yes, this car is 20 years old, but this is the model year that I like the most. The X350 line is my favorite of the Jaguars. So, I spent a year looking online, at least a year, maybe a little longer. I looked for cars for sale from private owners, from dealerships. I read about these cars. I read about the history of Jaguar. I learned everything I could learn about what to expect from this car, what could break, what would need to be replaced, reliability. And, you know, we've all heard horror stories about Jaguar, but what I found was they're really not any less reliable than most other cars. They are very high-tech cars. They are deceptively high-tech because when you sit in the car and you look at it, you know, it looks very classic. lots of leather, lots of wood, but the technology is there. You know, this car has technology that some aspects of technology that I didn't even know it had until I bought it, like power headrests, um, power folding mirrors, um, and you know, like I said, I spent a year looking at these, and there are some things that surprised me, like this car has a heated steering wheel. You turn on the seat heater and the steering wheel heats up too. It did not know that. Um, but you know, it has rain sensing wipers, has a power sunshade in the rear. This car has a lot to offer, and it didn't really cost a lot of money. And I am in no way a wealthy person. You know, I saved my money for a long time to be able to buy this car. But when I found it, I actually found this car at the beginning of my search a year ago. It was on a lot in Pennsylvania. I live in Kentucky, south central Kentucky, and I found this car on a lot in Pennsylvania, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And you know, the price was pretty okay. I knew I wanted a Vandenplas trim level car, and I wanted the long wheelbase. I was really looking for a long wheelbase because I wanted the flip down picnic trays in the back. Most of the Vandenplas are long wheelbase, and every long wheelbase has the picnic trays. This car was a Vandenplas, but it is a short wheelbase, or I should say a standard wheelbase. Very rare. You almost never see standard wheelbase Vandenplas. They're almost always a long wheelbase. So what I've found, though, is that if you do find a standard wheelbase Vandenplas, it will not have the picnic trays, and it will typically not have the LCD touchscreen display. This car does not have picnic trays, but it does have the touchscreen display, which is, again, unusual. You know, it just means that the original buyer paid a little extra when he bought this car. So, you know, being a standard wheelbase, I skipped it. I went looking elsewhere, and I spent a year looking elsewhere. And every 2 or 3 months, this car would pop up in my search. The dealership had this car for sale for a year. In fact, I found out that the owner of the dealership took the car home and drove it himself, put about 6,000 miles on it, or so, 6,000 or so miles. And that led me to believe that if the owner is doing this with the car, then it must be a fairly reliable car. Carfax looked good, pretty good service history. No damage, no accidents on the Carfax, which looked good. And like I said, every couple months, this car would pop back up in my search. And I eventually got to where I thought, I'm probably going to end up with this car. And I did. Ultimately, I determined that the price they wanted for this car was the right price. It was a fair price for the age and the mileage. It was one of the most fair of all that I found. And I'm telling you, I am a firm believer in Blue Book value. Car prices are outrageous today, and everybody wants too much money for a car. Well, not everybody. Most people do. And I believe in the Blue Book value. And although this car was a little over Blue Book, it was a lot closer to Blue Book than many of the other ones. And I'm telling you, some people were wanting $16,000 for one of these cars, $20,000, $25,000, and that's just outrageous. As good as these cars look, and even with low mileage, they're not worth that. Those guys are out of their minds. But this car was, again, although a little high, it was still better than most. So I bought the car. And I rented the car and I drove to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I picked up the car that morning, spent the night, picked up the car the next morning, and drove the car back home. And I've been loving it ever since. But there are a few things that needed fixing. You know, being a 20-year-old car, it's not perfect. There's a little bit of clunking when we were going over bumps, and so I will be replacing the sway bar end links front and rear. Driving home, I noticed that the headlights were on all the time, even when set to automatic mode. So I knew there had to be something probably wrong with the light sensor on the dashboard. Also, all the mirrors are electrochromatic, meaning they automatically dim when this sensor right here picks up bright light from the rear at night. That wasn't working. I figured it must be associated with that sensor. I fixed that. I found a message board post, and the guy on there said you can fix that in about 15 minutes. All you do is pry that sensor out of the dash, disconnect it from electric, take the sensor out of the housing, and underneath the smoked dome is another smaller dome, plastic dome, that covers the sensor. That dome darkens over the years, and all you got to do is get a knife and shave off a little bit of the plastic on that dome on top. Put it all back together, connect it to electric, snap it back into the dash, and that fixed the problem. Now my auto headlights work properly. You know, they're off during daylight hours and they come on at dusk. Also, it fixed my electrochromatic mirrors, and now my mirrors work again. When there's bright light behind me, they darken. Except for that one. That one's got a problem because all the fluid has leaked out and is pooling between the glass. So I have a replacement for that, and I'll be probably making a video of fixing that problem, because I think that's about a 5-minute fix as well. And I'll be making other videos when I do other repairs in this car, but there aren't many because the car is in exceptionally good condition. But when I do some work on it, I'll be sure to make videos of it. So that's where we are now on this channel. I guess we're transitioning to being a Jaguar channel. And I hope a lot of you stay, which, you know, on YouTube, I think I only have about 170 followers anyway. On TikTok, I have about 13,000. I hope you stay, because I hope to make things interesting. Hopefully, new people who are Jaguar lovers will join in and start following. I plan to make a decent amount of content. I plan to show the car off. I plan to drive it a lot. Well, not a lot. This is a weekend and special occasion car, but on weekends I will be driving it. But this car will receive special treatment. So if you stay, great. If you want to leave, I totally understand. No big deal. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but I hope you stay.